Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with the appwrite and the nextjs. We'll create a fresh new project and we'll understand that how we can inject appwrite into a nextjs project. We have to work on something known as parentheses. There are some routes which you can create with the parentheses. We have worked on the square brackets and there's a difference: parentheses, square brackets, curly braces. So we'll be talking about how we can utilize parentheses and something known as layout and can take advantage of this. So all of this in this video. Without a further ado, let's go ahead and get started because things are easier to understand if we go directly on the code part. I'll just copy this here and I'll just click and copy. First, we'll be generating a simple Next.js project. So let me go ahead and fire this up, a new fresh VS Code instance, and let me go ahead and get a project as well, just like this. So I'll just actually move this for a second and we'll be bringing this all up here. So that's nice. And let's create a new folder, a fresh new project, and we'll be calling this one as simply nextjs-appwrite because that's what it is. And obviously it's a YouTube project, so let's trail it with the YouTube as well. Drag and drop this, should be absolutely easy. Open up the terminal that we have, so if it can open that, so there we go. And paste the command simply, and at the end of it, I'll just add a dot so that it generates everything in the same project folder. Do you want to use TypeScript? Of course. Linting, I'm not a big fan, but I'll still use it. Tailwind CSS, yes, please give it to us. Source directory, do you want to use it? Yeah, I'll take the source directory. App router, yes, of course. Would you like to customize the default? I'll not customize it. I'll use the basic @, which is the default one, and that's it. Now it generates a fresh project for me. Now here's the idea. We'll not be working too much in the app folder in this video, or in this section of the video if you're watching it all in one go. We'll be first working on configuration of the appwrite because that's the logic part, that's the difficult part. How we build the pages and how we can transform the data, that's the easy part. There is nothing too much difficult for that one. All right, so looks great and looks okay. Now let's go back on to the appwrite and see how that we can configure it. I've already created an account on it, but we'll create a fresh project for this one because I have no shortage of creating the apps. I'll create this one and let's call this one as YouTube Next.js. Yeah, that's good enough name. Go ahead and create this. And there we go. Now you don't need to find any project ID or anything here. You can just simply click on the add web app because that's what it is. And let's call this one as Next.js with appwrite. That's my app name. The host that I'm using for this one is actually localhost, so no worries on that part. Now, as soon as you click on next, it will give you that what should I do? I should actually do npm install appwrite first. So I'll just copy this and we'll go up onto my code editor. And first and foremost, I'll just go ahead and do npm install appwrite. It's not really that much of a big package, comparatively very, very small, and that's majorly what we need. And then you can just ignore this because I'll walk you through how to do this with the web SDK. We just need the appwrite and just click on the next. And this is something that we'll be needing. So let's go back here. Into the root of directory, just create a .env. I'll create a sample env for as well so that I can give you all of these files as well. So I'll just go ahead and say sample.env so that I can push it onto the GitHub. I'll be working with this mainly. So let's go ahead and first grab the env file. In the env file, you need these two things. So endpoint, which is actually your Next.js public URL, and the endpoint, which is a project ID. So let's go ahead and add this one. So I'll just go ahead and lower this down. So this one for me is next_public_appwrite and URL. All right, and then simply have an equal to sign, and this is where you grab it. Copy this entirely without the quotes. That's the first part of it. And next part that we need is project ID. So notice here, that's a funny one. We won't be using that. We'll be using the actual one. So go ahead and copy this. And that's it. Now we don't need to come back. And again, by the time you'll be watching it, I might have already deleted that. But I'll still copy this and paste it up here so that you know which URLs to actually work on with this one. So this one is same, the top one. We are not worried about that part. Here I'll just add the classic one, 5C, 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 that whatever that is, so that it actually remains for you so that you can work on with that. Now let's also take a look on to our package.json as well, that what all we have. In this one, we have actually very less. We don't want to kind of overburden with this one. we'll be having just the appwrite. That's where the focus is. I won't be even installing the Axios and anything like that. We'll go with the classic. So that is it. If we need anything else, we can just go ahead and just create it at the go. And that is all. We can just hit the next here and take me to the dashboard. We don't need anything else. The advantage is when you actually work on with the authentication and the auth part, you don't have to worry anything. In case you wish, you can go into the settings and add all these things. Probably we can talk about them later on. Right now, I'm just worried about email and password. That is enabled for me by default. So that is it. That is all I need. One good idea is to, once you have done all of this, it's actually a good idea that we go ahead and say npm run dev, which we have already learned and see. So that at least I can see that whether my project is actually up and running or I need to debug at this point also. All right. Initially, it takes a little bit time to load. And there we go. We can see now the project is all good, done. We'll be just changing a lot of this this time. But don't you worry, I'll give you the exact CSS and the code files of the Tailwind and all of that so that you don't worry on that part. Now, first and foremost, inside the source, we can see there is this app folder and there's so much more going on. We'll discuss about the app a little bit later. Right now, we just want to go ahead and create a couple of other folders. Now, one of the more approach that I will walk you through in this one is first create a new folder into this one, and let's go ahead and call this one as conf for config, or maybe something else. I'll just go ahead and shrink down this app because I'm not interested in app as of now. I'll just right click on this, create a new file, and let's just call this one as conf.ts. Now, one of the common thing that you might have already seen that when we were importing these environment variables, we had to put an exclamatory sign to say that, hey, this is always there. I'm pretty sure of it. One of the other alternative that you'll see, especially in the production, is actually to use a config file or some other third-party libraries as well, which can get you a surety that it is there. One of the way of doing that is, you'll see this a lot, is actually create a simple conf variable just like this, or config. I'll just call it as conf. That's much better. And we can simply go ahead and create an object, and here we can simply say export default conf. Now this config will be responsible of having this, so we'll just go ahead and say, hey, I want appwrite URL, and that URL will be coming to me in a string so that I know the format that it's coming in. And in here, I can just go ahead and say process.env dot, and then the name of it, which is next suggestions appwrite public URL. Hopefully that's the same if I'm not making any mistake. All right, the next one is appwrite project ID, and we'll just go with the next public appwrite project ID. So now that we have exported it, that's actually considered as a far better approach instead of just directly calling them and calling them, hey, that's a string and that's an exclamatory sign. There are a couple of packages around it as well, which are also considered quite a lot with the dignity in the community as well. So I'll say that if you want, you can go ahead and have that one as well. Now let's go ahead and talk about the appwrite because that's the major ingredient here. So let's, in the source, we'll create a new folder and we'll just call this one as appwrite so that later on somebody comes up, he just knows exactly that, hey, this is the appwrite folder and all the configuration related to appwrite belongs here. I'll create a new file into this one and let's call this one as config.ts. Now this is the one file which will be talking to your appwrite. Now the way how you talk to the appwrite, it's not really difficult, it's actually easy. Appwrite from the appwrite package module gives you everything, your client, your account, your ID, anything that you need will be provided just directly by that. So let's go ahead and try this. First, I need the config. So I'll just go ahead and say, hey, bring me the conf from the config. Then I'll say that, hey, I need some stuff from appwrite. So what are the stuff? Anything that you want to deal with that. In this case, I obviously want to deal with the client. So client is one which will be talking to that, giving me the user details and everything. We are specifically working on account, so that's why we need that. And we'll also be smallly handling the ID part, so that's also important. In case you need more, this is exactly the place you actually write. So in case you want database or something, you just go with that. Right now, we are not playing around with the database. We'll do that in some another video. Right now, we're just this much important. Now we'll be creating some types as well. So far, we haven't created any type and we have always written any. That's also an approach. But in this case, we'll just write the type. So at the time of creating the user or at the time of logging in the user, we know exactly what type to expect in that. That's a TypeScript specific feature. We have talked quite a lot about TypeScript, so I think that's a good idea in this case. So we'll first create a type. which simply go ahead and say create user account. And we'll be creating a type for it as well. Now, similar to this, we'll also create another type. So let's go ahead and say the login user account. We'll be creating a type. All you have to do in this, since these are type specification, just mention what are the variables and what's their data type is. So in this case, I'll grab an email, I'll grab a password, and I'll also grab a name. That all string type, that's it. In the case of login a user, I'll just grab an email and I'll grab a password as a string, that's it. So this is my type. Again, you can skip this part in case you wish to, but all you have to do is just write the simple any in that case. Now, step one, how do we deal with that? This client is responsible for talking to appwrite. So let's create an object from this client. All we have to do is simply say new and client. This actually gives you a reference to it. Let's store this reference into a variable and call this one as appwrite client. There we go. Now storing the reference. This is going to be super helpful for us. This client actually talks to your appwrite, but it doesn't know how to talk to it. It doesn't know the URL. It doesn't know the project ID. So yes, you get it right. You have to exactly tell it that, hey, I need this. So appwrite client has a lot of methods into it, call, config, headers, and all of that. We are interested in this set endpoint. This is the first one. As soon as you do this, then you have to say that, hey, config or conf, I want to use appwrite endpoint. It doesn't know that endpoint. So obviously you have to go into the conf and look for that, hey, what is giving you that URL? So in this case, appwrite URL. So I'll just go ahead and copy this appwrite URL because it knows that variable. On top of this, once you have mentioned the URL, then you have to set the project ID. So on top of this, let's chain it. And then we'll say that, hey, I want to set a project. And the project also needs to go ahead and say appwrite project ID. And again, we'll be borrowing this one from here so that I don't make any mistake here. There we go. That's exactly same. Now at this moment, you specifically know that what project you're talking about and how you're talking about and all of that. Now on top of that, we have used this client. Now also we want to take a reference from the account. In case you're working with the database, you have to take the reference from database as well. But in this case, we are talking with the account. So just like we have taken the reference here with the client for setting up the connection, let's take a reference of the account as well. Super easy. So again, the idea is same. We want to have a new account reference and we can provide the appwrite client so it know how to talk to it. Let's store that into a variable. So let's go ahead and call this one as account with a small one, just like that. Not only that, I would love to export this as well because I'll be using it in a lot of other places. So just write an export here. So anybody can talk to the account wherever they want. We don't want to export it at the end. We just want to have it like this. Now, this is all basic. Now, whenever we work with the appwrite client, in case you have watched my other videos on the React Native and stuff, I always recommend to create a class out of it. The simple reason is as soon as the class constructor is, it actually does a lot of job for you. Not only that, you can create a lot of methods, asynchronous method, which are responsible for creating the account, logging in the account, log out the account, so that at the time when you're actually doing the work, you don't have to do the work there. You can just call these methods and it's a singular place where everything is being mentioned. This file is for just the authentication, but I usually prefer to create separate classes, all for authentication, all for database, all for storage, and just like that. This is my workflow that I usually like to do. So let's export this class so that anybody can use this. So we'll just go ahead and say, hey, I want to have a class which will be appwrite service. This is one of the best practice that you can utilize. Now in this, the first one that we are going to go ahead and say create a new user, or rather better will be create a new record of user inside appwrite. Probably that's a better name. All right, then what we are going to do is start with async create user account. I think that's a good suggestion. That's a good suggestion. And I'll just go ahead and close this like this. So all we are doing here is we are simply naming this as create user account. So we'll be using this method instead of the appwrite's account.create method. We'll be just taking email, password, and name that are given to me. And these are of type create user account. Remember the type that we have exactly created. So these are of type. So now instead of writing any here, I can just write the specific type. Now, since it's a database connection, it's no different than a MongoDB. It can fail. So we go ahead and wrap this up into the try catch. We won't be doing too much. We'll be just throwing the errors. So let's just go ahead and say, hey, I want to throw the error throw the error. That's it. In case you want to do console log or something more, you can go ahead and do that. In the try part, I would love to just go ahead and create a connect account. So I'll await this one because it can take some time. And I'll just go ahead and say account.create. Again, for creating all of these accounts, the thing which is responsible is this account. Not only it actually creates the account, it actually gives me some more details about the user, that whether it is logged in, session is there or not, so I can use it later in later point as well. Once that is being done, all I'm going to do is we'll be just creating this, but I think we can do a tiny bit better. Just instead of saying email, password, and name, we also need to put a unique ID for this one, because this is a new record in the entry. So obviously you have to do it. It sometimes I have to check the docs to actually make a comment. I'll put that in the comments if I have something in my mind. But again, in this case, I'll just use the ID directly, which already we have. And we have a method on this, which is known as unique. So, oops, unique, just like that. So there we go. Now still, we are creating this. Now notice here, we are not taking this from the user. So anybody who creates or call this method, don't have to worry about this ID. We are directly bringing it from the appwrite. It gives us this ID, and you don't have to use any UUID or something like that. So let's go ahead and store that into a variable. Call this one as user account. There we go. Nice and easy. Once this is all done, then let's check if the user account was created or not. So simply go ahead and ask for it that, hey, do you have this user account? If you have it, just return this user account. Based on this, user can do that. If he founds an account, redirect him on to login or keep him on the page or something like this. I think if the user account is created, then I'll go ahead and simply log in. So I'll just say this. Again, .login feature doesn't exist right now. I have to actually go ahead and create this one. Remember, it doesn't exist right now. Just like the create user account is responsible for creating it, I'll create my own login feature so that I immediately log in the user. I already have the access of email and password, so I can directly pass on to this one. And it's the job of my method, which I'm about to create, that, hey, go ahead and log in the user. And in the else case, I'll just return whatever is being given to me. So I'll just go ahead and say, hey, you want to return this user account. Now, there are chances that you have nothing in the user account. So I'll check on the front end part that if user account is nothing, I'll just accordingly proceed. And if there's something into it, I don't have to worry. I'm not returning that. I'm just returning the login. So I'm directly going inside this. All right. Now, one of the issue is that this whole thing looks great, the try catch and everything, but I don't have this thing, the login, which is creating a problem. So immediately the first thing that I'll do is just go ahead and create this so that it stops giving me these errors. So go ahead and say async, login, and there we go. Now this should be all happy. And it says async, login account. Why are you giving? Okay, property, password. So we don't have this password. Let's see. We have this password in the login user account. So I think there is some issue. All right, shouldn't be that much. Login user account. We have this one. Should be all okay. Let's try this one more time. Or probably we are missing some of these. So where is this shrinking in? All right, so let's expand this. Probably I'm missing out some of this one. So this is whole part of it. And now here we can actually do the login. Is this extra? Looks like this. Yeah, this is probably extra. So I have this create user account. So yeah, I think. Now let's go ahead and try an async login email just like this and have this. Yeah, this one was extra. All right, anyways. So now, obviously, this is where we are catching the errors. So this is giving us some issues here. Let's go ahead and expand this. Why are having some issue? Okay, error is not of defined type. So we can go ahead and say any. Still, there is an issue. There is an issue. All right, let me check this. I'm pretty sure the issue is of these curly braces. Let's try this. All right. Catch, finally, there is something issue. This is the try block. Else, let me just quickly check and find out that I'm pretty sure this is an issue of a curly braces. So let me just quickly figure out that. I really hate these indentation issues. I thought somehow that I'm in YAML file or something. But yes, finally I have fixed it. It's actually not that bad. I was just missing this one here and this one is here. So now we have this async login, which is also resolving the issues that all we were having. This is still not in the best indentation where I want it to be. But okay, I'll get that. It sometimes happens and it's not the best of the work. All right, let's just close this one. Let's close this one. Now it's in the better position. I prefer it to be on this line, a little bit indentation like this, but we'll keep it there. All right, so now we have this login method as well, which is accepting email and password. How it is doing the login, that's not our concern. But since if I'm here and I know these kinds of mistakes will happen, I'll just first declare rest of the other method as well. So another method that we'll be going with that is going to be to finding out whether it is logged in or not. So we'll just go ahead and say is logged in. So if he's logged in or not. And this is going to be a promise, but we'll worry about that in a second. First, let's go ahead and get is logged in. This will give us a promise that whether the user is there or not. If it is a user, it will give me the user data. Otherwise, it will just return me a false. And similar to this, we might need to get the current user as well. So async, and we'll be saying get current user. Again, you can design as many methods as you like. And finally, last but not the least, we'll be giving it a logout as well. Async logout, that's it. Now it's time to implement them. Implementation is super simple. We can go ahead and work on with that. So let me try with the login first. Again, the most easiest one to go with that. Hopefully I don't do the typos of the try catch. The error, that's any, and we can simply go ahead and simply do a throw error. Throw suggestions, throw error, that's it. In the try part of the login, it's actually one of the simplest of all login. All you have to do is simply say account, and it just creates an email session. So again, create email session, not the session. So we'll be using create, come on, create, too many suggestions. Create email session. That's the one I want to use, and I'll just pass on email and password just like that. And we'll be awaiting this because it takes some time, and we'll be returning this. So as soon as a session is being created, I'll just return that session directly. So return await just like that. Told you it's super simple. It's a backend pre-written, so there is nothing too much to discuss on that. Now this is logged in is actually an event which will happen in the future as well. So this is going to return me a user itself. So it's the best idea that you actually go ahead and make it a promise. Again, you can just go with the try catch. It might take some time and all of that, but actually giving it a Boolean value and promise a Boolean value, that's actually better because it's an event that will happen in the future. Boolean, there we go. And again, looks okay. Why are you having this issue? A function whose declared type is neither undefined, void, must return a value. Yes, I will return a value, don't you worry. I'll go ahead and return that in all the other case, just go ahead and return a false. So that should actually get rid of this. Now let's go ahead and try catch this. So in the catch, we'll just go ahead and say, hey, I don't want to do anything. So we'll just keep it as it is. So there is nothing that we are doing because if you don't do anything in the catch phase, that's okay because we are anyhow returning the false that I couldn't get the user. So that makes sense. But in case you want to do that in the catch phase as well, that's okay. And all we're going to do is returning a Boolean data. So what this actually does, I can just go ahead and say await, and then I can find this dot get current user. So this is a method which actually gets you the current user, and we can just hold this into a data. Now in this case, you can return the data, there is no problem for it, but we have actually created a separate method which is get current user. This is just checking whether you are logged in or not. This will be super helpful at later phase. Now one of the hack that you can do here is you can just go ahead and simply return something like this, and then you can say, hey, I want to return a Boolean variable based on data. If the data is present, it will return a true. If the data is not present, it doesn't get anything, it automatically returns a false. Very tricky, but it happens. In case you don't want to do that, that's okay. You can try if and else. If the data is present, return a true. If data is not present, return a false. That's also valid. No worries at all. All right. So this part is all easy. Now we are done with this logged in. Now this is the point where we'll be doing almost the same. This dot get current user, there is a better way of getting the current user. Again, both of them returns you the data. So we'll be working with that. In the get current user, we can actually get the current user. Simple, absolutely simple. Just go ahead and have a try catch. And in the error part, we'll be doing a simple error. So just like this, let's go ahead and do a console log. And in the console log, we'll be simply saying that, hey, I want this error. And I'll also want that get current user actually provided that error. So get current user actually gave me this error. And I'll just go ahead and work with the error. Yeah, that's it. All right, why are you having issue? This is having an issue, which is having an unexpected colon, just like this. Why are you having an issue? Get current user, error. Do you need this one? Yeah, it needs this one. And now why are you having an issue? All right, this is bad. This is bad. Why is it having an issue? All right, so if this is not working, first and foremost, I want to return a null. So there we go. That is happy. Ah, man, sometimes it's difficult to even read the errors, that why is it giving me these errors? Let's try it one more time. Oh, my bad. This one shouldn't be there. Yeah, this one is happy now. All right. Okay, so now this part is handled. And if we are able to get the current user getting, there are two ways of getting the current user. The first one is this dot get current user. Remember, this is the instance of this entire thing. So remember, here we are creating this appwrite and hold this. So I want to get the user of this. But there is another way in case this is confusing to you. You can go ahead and use this account. Remember, we have account. Just simply get it. That's it. That's all it takes to get all the details about the current user. Since we are getting this, let's go ahead and return this as it is. In the front end side or in the pages side, we'll see that what this current user actually gets us. You can do a console log here as well, but we'll just return this. And in all the other cases, we're returning the null. You can read the documentation of appwrite as well. It's that ridiculously simple. And also in the logout, it's again simple. There are a couple of ways how you can do the logout. You can delete multiple sessions as well, or you can delete the session as well. So there are multiple ways of handling this. I'll just go ahead and do a try catch. And there we go. Suggestions are really, really nice in this case. Okay, so what it's doing is it's returning an await where it says account.delete session. And we can just provide the current. This is a string. Yes, this is a string where it actually removes the current session. And then you can simply go ahead and catch the errors thrown out. So this is the basics of how this is being done. Now, if you remember, this is the class. We are not, we can export this class as well, but nobody needs this entire class. We can actually make it kind of a one-time usable, and we can do something like this. Let me show you. We can go ahead and say, hey, appwrite service. I'll create an object from this class, and then I'll go ahead and export a default appwrite service. That's it. Now, again, you can directly get this class and just create an object there, then run with this. But since I can make my life a little easier, I can just go ahead and create an object directly here from the class and export that object and have a default of it so that I can import this and work on with that. I also have an access of account. So in case I need something more, I can do this. But I think everything that is probably usable, I'll do this. I'll prefer that to do in my class itself. So that is what the wrap up of the appwrite configuration that we have here. Now, let's also work a little bit of how we will be using the context as well, because that's also important. Let's go ahead and save this. So we'll be just removing this. Now, since we have all of this, now you'll be super happy that how we are working with the context part of it. The context is nothing. It's just a wrapper, which will be wrapping up a lot of components and will tell these components whether the user is logged in or not. So if he's not logged in, we'll be protecting some of the pages. If he's logged in, we'll be allowing him to access the certain pages. That's all it is. So let's go ahead and do this. We'll be creating our own context. So let's go into the source, create a new folder and call this as context. There we go. The context will have just the two files. The first one is useauth, which is our own custom hook that we'll be writing. And we'll be creating first a new file to provide this auth context. Auth context and .ts, of course. The way how you write the context is, it's super simple. If you know the React, you will be just doing it like this. But in case you don't know about the React as well, that's also okay. Creating the context mainly includes creating a provider. Provider is something which provides you the information. That's all it is. That is all. So let's go ahead and do this. The step one of doing this is first go ahead and import a create context just like this. And no, we don't want it to from the Vim. We want it from React. Come on, React. There we go. Once we have this, then we have to export a couple of things. First is auth context, and the second one is auth provider. Okay, how do we do that? First is export const auth context, which will be created by this create context. There we go, and we go like this. That's it. It actually does that. But how is it going to tell me that somebody is logged in or not? That's the job of the context. It gives me the information. Right now, it's going to tell me just a Boolean information and a way to update that Boolean information, but you can pass on so much of the information here. So again, this will be responsible for just two things: giving me a Boolean value and the ability to update that Boolean value. Otherwise, what's the point of it? It will always give you the same information. So what we're going to do is, after this context that we have, we'll first declare the data type here. So how we do that? We simply go ahead and use this, and inside this we can have a curly braces. This is a type declaration. You can avoid that, skip that. That's no big deal, but I'll still declare that. The first one is auth status. The auth status obviously is going to be a Boolean, and then a method or a way how I can update this. So I'll just call this one as set auth status. And this status obviously is a Boolean type, but I'm declaring a method here. So notice here, this is a callback, not callback. It's actually an arrow function. So it doesn't do anything. It returns you void. But now I have mentioned my data type that, hey, there will be a value which will be true and false, and I have the ability to update this value via the context as well. So by default, the auth status will be false, so nobody is logged in. And I'll also give that, hey, right now this is an empty method, but since I'm expecting or accepting a method, you can go ahead and provide me a value. And since I'm also providing auth states, using this method, you can actually change this. That's the whole idea. And that's how you always actually do this. You can provide more information here, an entire object as well, but it's really simple. Now, this is the half part. This is the half part, that's the context. You also have to have a provider. See, this is the informational part of it, context. And when I'll be creating component, I'll show you that I can actually, just like I create use state, I can create a simpler hook like that, which will give me direct information whether user is logged in or not. And I'll actually ask the use for this. Provider is something which wraps all these components, because otherwise there is a prop drilling and a whole lot of things in the React itself. So what I'll be doing is I'll be creating a provider which will act as a wrapping box where I can put my components, and anytime my component need an information, I can just directly grab it. So this is how I do it: export const auth provider auth context.provider. Now, since this auth context is created from this create context, it has the ability of that. For more information, read the React docs. That's the basic. Once we have all of this, let's go ahead and export this. So we are going to go ahead and say export. And did we export it? No, export const auth provider. Let's go ahead and export default as well. Although not required, but I prefer to have a default so that I don't use curly braces and all of that. I'll just have this one. All right, that's the part one of it. Now also, let's go ahead and make a hook from it. Now, how do you design the custom hooks? That's an interesting one. Let's go ahead and design a hook. It will be not as powerful as a use state, use effect, something like that, but it's our hook. We'll call this one as use auth. There's no such thing in the React, which is known as use auth. So we'll be creating our own. How can I create such hook on my own? You can. You can do this really simple steps. So first and foremost, you have to use the context. So use context from React. That's the first part. Also bring in that auth context that you have created. So now it's super simple. Just go ahead and say const use auth is my hook, just like this. And there we go. What does this hook does? Every single time you use this hook, it just provides you the data which is there in this auth context. What's the data? Yep, this exact data. And all I'm looking up for is this auth context and status. So all the data will be given to you. So now I can just go ahead and say, hey, give me the data. And the data will be coming up from use context, auth context. That's it. This is classic React 101. Again, this can be a little bit confusing, but this is what we have. And after this, you can just go ahead and simply say return data, and the data will be returned to you. Now, what's inside this data? That's very, very crucial question. I'll surely answer that. But it's easier to answer all of this when I'll actually show you directly in the console log. That's much easier. So there we go. Finally, we'll be exporting this. Now, I highly recommend that you go ahead and read a little bit. So in case you are confused about this part of the code, go ahead and say that, hey, I want to study more about this. Let me show you this. So this use context in the React is actually available directly. So just search for this use context and in the React. And I'm pretty sure they'll redirect to, where's the official documentation? Yeah, here it is. Notice here, this is why it's saying use context is a React hook that lets you to read and subscribe to the context from your component. Context is something that we are creating, and it reads and subscribes to our context so that anytime there is a change and all of that, it actually automatically gets to know that. And then it's actually used to passing the data deeply into the tree, whatever that's exactly what you're using. And notice here, they are exactly saying that, hey, how to use it, caveats and all of that. And we're using exactly what they are doing. So notice here, we have created this provider, something like this. We'll be using almost exactly like this, theme context or provider, something like this. So read the documentation a little bit, that how they are doing it. That's the basic. In case you don't understand it much, I do have a video on the context as well on my channel. If you want a newer one, just let me know in the comment section. I'll try to do that as well. All right, so a lot of work that we have done in this one video. We have created a lot of things. Appwrite connection is all done. Configurations is all done. Context is all done. These are major portion of it. We have to spend a little bit time in creating the component since this app looks beautiful and beautiful takes time. So the next video is all about creating the components. Don't worry, I'll not waste a lot of your time in just the CSS part of it. I'll give you directly there because there's no sense of it. We are not on the Tailwind side. We are on the Next.js side. And I highly recommend to read a little bit more about it because I can understand already this context part. If your React basics and foundations are not that great, you will struggle here. Either brush up them or just ask me, I'll do that. So go ahead and understand it. If you got this one, it's basic one. So that's it for this video. I hope you have enjoyed this one. Let's go ahead and catch up in the next one.